Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Qdabra webinar. My name is Jimmy Risch. I'm the lead developer on FormsViewer, and we're going to be talking about the newly released FormsViewer 3.2 and some other nifty FormsViewer related stuff that's been in development recently. So FormsViewer 3.2 was released last month, within the last couple of weeks. In the US region, it was released on October 25th. In our Europe region, it was released on October 29th. And in case you haven't seen it before, we've got a nice page on our main website that details the what's been added in each different version of FormsViewer. So let's have a quick look at that. In this new version, 3.2, we mostly focused on bug fixes and small improvements, things that our users had alerted us to, or things we discovered while working on customer forms. So just trying to smooth things out a little bit in this release cycle. A couple of the main attractions here. File attachment controls. Some of you may have noticed that if you attach large files to your file attachment controls, the form can just seize up for a little bit while it's trying to process that file. We've moved that processing into the background now, so that rather than having your whole browser lock up, it shows a wait animation till that's done. And we also improved the algorithm that does that a little bit, so it's a few seconds faster for those large files. We've added some better error handling in a few areas. Some people had situations where their views would just stop working because an error occurred in them. That shouldn't happen too often, but if forms are using strange features, it could happen in certain cases. So now we show explicit pop-up error message to let you know something's wrong. Similarly, if an error happened during form load, sometimes you've seen it pop up that just says an unspecified error has occurred. We've been trying to work out the main scenarios there where an error can happen and show a more specific error, so that in some cases you can solve the problem yourself, or in other cases you can let us know and have us look into the matter. It's now possible to use SharePoint's REST API from anonymous forms. I believe there are some issues with doing this before. We found a bug in the get day of year command, which basically returns a number between 1 and 356, depending on the current day of the year. We found that it was off during daylight savings time in time zones that have daylight savings time. So we fixed that. Certainly JSON to XML, when consuming certain JSON-based web services, you could run into an error under certain situations where they uses strange property names. That's fixed now. We've got a new and improved start page with some guidance text. Most of you familiar with FormsViewer shouldn't really need the guidance text, but we've spiffed it up a little bit. You can now query hyperlink columns from SharePointList. It wasn't possible before. And if you've got a list form, you can also submit to hyperlink columns. And a couple other minor things. So also, we've got a new feature in the works. We've just added this week. We're going to be publishing out in the next week or so. For those of you who have used the get user profile by name QRules command to query user profile info, currently, as of now, it only queries some basic user info like email, user ID, display name, plus the department and manager. Now you can actually specify which properties you want. So first name, last name, title, anything that's stored in the SharePoint profile, you should be able to retrieve now, as long as you specify which properties you want. We're going to have a look at that in action in a couple of minutes. So that's just been added in dev, so we're planning to publish that out in the next week or two. Also, for anyone using SharePoint on-prem, we've now got SharePoint free mode of FormsViewer, which basically allows you to use FormsViewer without having to associate it with a SharePoint environment. So you can use that with Windows authentication, ADFS, and Azure AD for your user store. This currently is only on-prem, so you'd have to have your own server to host the FormsViewer. But let us know if you're interested in this, and we'll help you get it set up. RefreshSharePointList. This is a pretty nifty QRules command that doesn't get a lot of attention, I think. In this version 3.2, we discovered a couple of bugs that was in it. FormsViewer already had this command, but there were some issues. So we did a major overhaul of this command to improve and fix some of those bugs. And I'll be showing that in my demo in just a moment. It's basically a companion to the submit to SharePoint list command, which I think is a little more popular. Submit to SharePoint list submits to a list, as the name suggests. What RefreshSharePointList does is it looks at the items in the form that have been submitted to a list based on their IDs and the mapping in the form, and it updates the data within the form to match the data that's in that list. So if you had edited those values in the list outside of the form, either manually or you had something else, some other form that was interacting with the list, or some other process that changes the values or even deletes the rows, this RefreshSharePointList can detect those changes and then update the data within your form to match it, and also delete the rows that have been removed. In the opposite direction, if within your form you delete rows, this RefreshSharePointList helps keep track of which rows have been added and deleted. So when you do submit back to the list, it can actually remove items from the list that have been removed from your form to additionally keep things in sync. So yeah, let's have a look at our demo form for today. And okay, so here I have it open in InfoPath Designer, and this is a basic supply requisition form for basically ordering office supplies within an office. And the couple features I'm demoing here are, first of all, RefreshSharePointList. So I've got, since I'm running most of my logic during load, I've got it here on the Qdabra rules finished loading field. And really, all you need to do to use this RefreshSharePointList command, you just run this simple command here, RefreshSharePointList items. Mode equals update is what tells it to actually update the values in your form, rather than just telling you what changed in an output value. So I'm having that run anytime form name is not blank. So basically, anytime we're opening an existing form from SharePoint. And as with the submit to SharePoint list command, that uses a mapping file, a mapping XML file, which can be managed within FormsViewer Designer feature. We'll have a look at that. So let's just see that in action for now. So I'll go into my library. And we'll open up a new form. Okay, so here's a new form. We can see it's pre-populated with my name, email address, title, and location. These are all being queried in using that get user profile by name command that I mentioned earlier. And we can just have a look at what that's doing there. We can see a list of the QRules commands that have been executed in the form. And here's that get user profile by name, and I'm telling it to retrieve the title and SPS location properties. So it's getting those. Here is the data retrieved from the user profile service. So we can see we've got these 5 basic fields: plus title and SPS location. If I wanted a couple more, I could just tack them on, like first name, last name, manager, and there we've got those additional values there. So it's really helpful for pulling user data. I can also use this to query somebody else's info. So like user equals Patrick Halstead. So yeah, gives me his title is Chief Project Manager and location is Kirkland. So that's pretty nifty. All right, so simple form here. We're just going to fill in some values. I'll get 5 batteries, some paper, and paper clips to go with the paper. Let's go with 3 of those. All right, so we filled it out. Let's go ahead and submit. All right, and so here we've submitted to the library. We'll go over to the list where it's submitted. Supply order items. Here I have the view grouped by order, so we want to look at this one I just submitted. Now we've got our batteries, 5 batteries, 2 reams of paper, and 3 boxes of paper clips. So let's say something external to the form was being used to review these orders and make changes to them. I don't have something like that, so I'm just going to do this manually right now. But let's say somebody decided we're out of paper, we can't fulfill this paper request, so we're just going to remove that from the order. And paper clips, we've got a limit on how many paper clips you can order at a time, so we're going to limit that to 2 boxes of paper clips. All right, so I've removed one item and I've changed the quantity on paper clips from 3 to 2. So let's go back to our library and reopen that order, the one I submitted a minute ago. And we can see here that it has detected that the paper was removed and that the paper clips quantity had been changed. So that's all done for us with a simple QRules command. And we can see that here being run here, refresh SharePoint list items, mode equals update. Now let's say now I decided I don't need those batteries after all, so I'll delete those batteries from here, from within the form, and submit. Okay, now I'll go back to my list and refresh, and we'll see that the battery request is no longer here in the list. So what refresh list items did was when it loaded the form, it detected what had changed in the list and updated the form data accordingly. In addition, it added a tracker to the rows in the table so that if any were removed, when I submitted back to the list with submit to SharePoint list, it actually removed that one item from the list. So that's a pretty nifty way to keep your forms in sync with the library data. You don't have to fiddle with querying the data and diffing it back and forth. You just run that simple command and it takes care of it for you. And just to have a look at what that mapping looks like, come in here, supply requisition, design, and that mapping is right here in our designer. So for those of you who haven't used the submit to SharePoint list command, our forms designer contains a view here for managing those mappings. You just give them a name, tell it which list to submit to, which fields to match up with the columns, and then inject the mapping, and the mapping is put right into your form. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the new release. As a bit of a bonus topic, FormsViewer Extensions. Now, up until recently, we didn't have a way for people to open FormsViewer from the modern UI in SharePoint. We worked on this throughout June and July, and we came up with something called FormsViewer Extensions, which we originally demoed in our August 2nd webinar. So I would recommend checking that webinar out if you want more information about this topic. It allows you to basically enable your modern UI libraries to open your forms in FormsViewer. Some of you may have noticed I clicked a FormsViewer icon in the, let's see, where are we? I clicked this FormsViewer icon here in the icon bar to open a new form, and I could also click either of these document names to open up existing documents in FormsViewer. You can download the add-on from infopathdev.com. In terms of what it looks like to actually use this feature, you basically set it up as a web part in a SharePoint page. It basically queries the libraries within your site, and you can tell you can add settings for which columns you want to open up in FormsViewer. Just tell it what FormsViewer URL to associate with, and the template name that's associated with the form. So definitely check that out if you haven't used it yet. It's great for these new modern libraries, which we're all moving towards. Okay, so lastly, we've got a little demo here. Any of you who have used hyperlinks in your forms in FormsViewer may have noticed that they open in a new browser tab. So I've got a form here called this one, open links, same tab. So if I click any of these links, it's actually going to open up a new tab here. So this is intentional. It's by design. You usually don't want people to leave your form abruptly and go somewhere else because they could lose any data they've entered. But there are situations where you do want the links to actually navigate within the same tab. Maybe you've got sort of a navigation form that's just static links to your other forms, or maybe you've got some sort of workflow process where you want people to jump from one form to the next. So in that case, what do? We've put together this little script that you can use to actually make the links navigate within the same tab. So let's see, it's just a JavaScript file. It's about 20 lines of JavaScript. And to add this to your form, all you do is you come in here to the resource files and add the JavaScript file there. Then you use a qrules command. Looks like it's missing from here for some reason. But you use a qrules command to run the load resource command, which you'll see in a sec, and that'll just load in the JavaScript and change your link behavior. So we'll try that right now here. See, it runs the load resource command, and we'll see that if I click either of these links, it navigates within that same tab. So if you have a need for this, this will be included in the webinar packages, the webinar package that we distribute today, and we'll also put it up on our InfoPath Dev website. Okay, so just a little bit of marketing. Why FormsViewer? It's currently the lowest cost way to bring your InfoPath forms forward into the new world where Microsoft is slowly ramping down its support for InfoPath. You get new features like the ones we've demoed here, the link behavior, external user access, JSON web services, and all this great stuff. All is included in FormsViewer and Qdabra support. Most of our customers think it's great, and so that's why FormsViewer. So we've got a question: when will FormsViewer extensions be available for on-premise? The trouble with on-premise is that as of now, they do not support the ability to override the columns in modern UI libraries. That's basically a limitation within SharePoint on-prem as of right now. Once that situation changes, we should be able to get that working up in on-prem. I don't know where on-premise is as of right now in terms of the modern UI situation, whether it's even there or not, but that's sort of what's blocking us for on-prem right now. We've got another question for the refresh SharePoint list. Does the user need to have SP permission to delete in order to delete list items? And while I haven't tested this, I would imagine the answer is yes. Basically, FormsViewer, when you're not running in anonymous mode, it acts on behalf of the user in the sort of context of their permissions. So I think they would need to have the permissions to delete from a list in order for FormsViewer to be able to do so on their behalf. So that's it for questions. If anybody's got another question in the next 10 seconds, I'll be happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you for coming today, and I hope you continue to use FormsViewer and enjoy it. Thank you very much, and bye for now.